Cool, thanks, Jack. Well, next up is Richard Faulkner is going to be getting up and telling us a little about Citrix Cloud. Fun fact, Richard was a nuclear sub-engineer. That's pretty badass, if you ask me. So, I did not actually know that until I read it.
I actually have a picture of myself in a Hawaiian shirt at the North Pole.
Wow. You could just talk about that for 45 minutes. I'd be happy with that. But yeah, you might want to just hear about Citrix Cloud and what he's doing today in EUC, but you know, that's just me. So. All right, man. Here you go, Rich.
Thanks. All right, we're working. All right, appreciate it. I told Mitch I was feeling kind of bad that I was the guy that had to follow his speech. I mean, that was awesome. Really enjoyed the push there and everything. I can remember I was actually at the last in-person XL, which was in Texas, Houston. But I also attended an XL here at this stadium one time, and one of the speakers there was talking about cloud and all the problems that they had with Citrix Cloud, and probably why you shouldn't move over to it. So I'm glad to be here to try and talk about some of those things that and reasons why you might want to reconsider now. Okay, so we're gonna go through. The first thing we're gonna talk about is we're gonna talk about what is Citrix Cloud. What does that mean when I say Citrix Cloud? Because there are a lot of misconceptions, a lot of things that people get wrong when they're thinking about those pieces. Then we're gonna talk about, okay, if I decide to move to the cloud, how am I gonna get there? What steps should I take? What are some things that can make it easy for me to get there, and those kind of things. Then we're gonna go through some of the gotchas that I've experienced. We've moved several of our customers, including several large multi-thousand seat organizations that have moved up to the Citrix Cloud. So you can see, is this something for me? And then, and like I said, we'll go through some of the different pieces of it. First thing I'd like to do is introduce myself. My name is Rich Faulkner. I am a Citrix technology professional and an enterprise solutions architect. No, I don't work for Red Bull Racing. I do get the shirt. The question a lot when I'm wearing the shirt. I wear the shirt because I'm hoping they'll invite me to a race sometime, because they'll say that I wear it all the time. But other than that, yeah, I love cars, I love racing, and when Citrix sponsored Red Bull, I was in, so I'm good. And then I've been working with Citrix since the product was called WinFrame. And if you guys are used to it, you know that don't get married to a product name because it's going to change again, right? I've always worked for a reseller. And they have an annual meeting called Citrix Summit, and we used to joke, another summit, another name change. Because every year there was another something else that was moving on. Okay, and I did want to do a fun fact. Of course, it was stolen. The Kansas City Chiefs have won 2 Super Bowls. There are, in fact, 4 franchises that have never been to a Super Bowl, and 12 franchises, sorry, didn't mean to rub it in, and 12 franchises that have been, but have never, the rest of them have been, but have never won a Super Bowl. There are also 2 franchises, one of my favorites, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the New England Patriots, who have won 6 Super Bowls. So, all right, so first thing we're gonna do, like I said, we're gonna talk about what is Citrix Cloud, and I said there are some misconceptions. I don't want you to think that this is one of the misconceptions that are common among people, but there are some misconceptions about what it is. The second thing I'd like to say is if you're tired of hearing cloud, I'm sorry. I'm going to apologize right now. You're going to hear it a lot during this speech, okay? Citrix Cloud, and I apologize for the eye chart. I try to keep them small and simple, but I wanted everybody able to see. When in your Citrix environments, first of all, how many people here are running in Citrix Cloud right now? Okay, so we do have a couple people. How many of you are considering migrating your applications up to the cloud? Okay, so we got some more. And then how many people are, you're gonna have to drag my on-premises environment out of my cold, dead hands? Okay, we got a few of those, all right. So, the biggest thing about Citrix, if you followed the desktop in a box, if you followed any of the different sections, you'll see you've got your 4 planes, right? So you start off with your access layer, right? This is how I get in there, my access gateway, the storefront that supplies the back end of it. Then I go on to my control layer, which is going to be my delivery controllers. I've got a SQL database that backs it up. I've got Director that does my monitoring, all the rest of that stuff. Then I have my resource layer, which is where my VDIs are, where my apps exist, and everything runs from. And then I have my data layer, and that's going to be your login support with Active Directory, your application ends, whether it's mail or databases and so forth, where your files are stored and all the rest of that, okay? So if we got these 4 layers, what Citrix Cloud does is they take over the access and the control layer, and they move that up into the cloud. The nice thing about this is that Citrix has now taken on all of the updating you got to do, all of the backups of the database, keeping all those, having highly available SQL servers, all that control and everything that you have to do, doing all your updates and everything, and they're taking that on, okay? So that's all moved up to the cloud. You can still put your resource layer and your data layer on premises. You can still run all your stuff where it is. I now connect up using a cloud connector. We'll talk about some of the intricacies of that here in a little bit as well. But the nice thing about this is that Citrix has now taken on that updating, right? So instead of me having to go through every time they come out with a new feature, every time they come out with a new piece and everything, Citrix takes care of the big parts, which is the control layer and the database and all the rest of that. All you have to do is take care of your environment. Now, a lot of the misconceptions come in, and most of my customers, I have to explain to them that Citrix Cloud does not mean that your resources or your data plane have to be in the cloud, okay? So you can still keep them on premises, or you can run them in the cloud, or as many of my customers do, they'll have a on-premises environment with a backup that runs in Azure or AWS or GCP, okay? So what are some of the reasons why I might want to move up? First of all is that maintenance, right? I mean, how many of you guys get tired of getting the Patch Tuesday and having to keep up with all that information and everything? So Citrix is going to make sure you keep all your stuff up to date. They're going to keep your security going there on the gateways and so forth. They're going to keep all that information, and that's a bit of a workload for a lot of companies, having to keep up with that, especially keeping highly available SQL servers going and doing the backups on those databases. That could be a lot of work, especially in smaller companies where you've got 2 or 3 IT guys, and now I've got to keep up with all this. As a guy who works for resellers, it's kind of a bummer for us because one of the things that we did quite often was once a year go do an upgrade for customers, and that was money in our pocket to do that. So you can save that money as well. The second thing, the reason why you might want to do this is because you can save money. Now, like cloud, I mean, Citrix has taken on the maintenance. The licensing does cost more than keeping your renewal on premises. But for example, if you use the ADC and you're like most of my customers and they have an ADC, but they only use it for Citrix Gateway, I like to call the ADC the Swiss Army knife that everybody uses to cut stuff, right? They don't use any of the other blades on the knife. They just cut things with it. I've got one customer that's got like 700 pages of config on their ADCs. Compared to most people, it's just running Citrix Gateway. So if you're just running Citrix Gateway, the cost of renewing that gateway, the cost of keeping up with that gateway and everything is now eliminated because you can move your Citrix Gateway up to the cloud. I'm sorry, Citrix, you may not want me telling them that, but I can tell you that probably 90% of our customers, they only have an ADC because they need a gateway, okay? And then the final reason is all of the new stuff that's coming out is released in the cloud first, okay? So if you like the new features, I mean, the last 12 months have been tremendous new releases in the HDX and the capabilities supporting Teams and those kind of things. If you like having all those, the Citrix Cloud target is every 3 weeks. They're coming out with a new feature, okay? If you're running on premises, even if you're in a current release environment, you're gonna wait up to 3 months to get that new feature out there, where in the cloud, you'll have it in 3 weeks. If you're running LTSR, you're waiting for a really long time. Now, Citrix does offer, if you are a company that wants stability, I don't wanna mess with this stuff, I don't wanna take any chances that there's a problem, you can specify that your Citrix Cloud remain at the last long-term service release, okay? So you can have that capability if that is something that is required of your environment, okay? So now we're gonna move on to how do I move my stuff up to the cloud, all right? Citrix figured out that a lot of people are having trouble getting their stuff moved up. Some of the environments are very large. If you're somebody, like some of my customers have north of 200 applications published in their environments, if I had to go and manually republish every one of those applications, that would probably keep me from going to the cloud. So Citrix released the automated config tool, which is a very powerful tool, which is why people get upset when they release a new one and it breaks. It has had its challenges, but it's usually get it corrected pretty quick afterwards. But what the automated config tool allows you to do is that it will, first of all, it will export your current config off of the environment that you have, and it will export it out to a group of files that you can then use to import the entire config at once, which I don't recommend, or you can import pieces here and there. You can do the machine catalogs, you can do your policies, you can do the published apps, just that one section, and import it into the cloud, and it will allow you to bring that information in. The other thing it allows you to do is it does let you copy from cloud to cloud. So some of my customers like to have a test or a dev test in production environments. So I can go into dev, make my changes, see how everything's working, works great. I export it, import it into test. We go run, everything works well in the test. I export it from test and into production, and now I have my production environment. Okay, so it does allow you to do all that, and you don't have to worry about making sure you didn't miss a checkbox or dot an I or cross a T somewhere, because it exports it and imports it for you. And finally, the most important thing that the tool does for those people who are in the cloud already, use this tool, back up your config, okay? If something happens and something happens on the Citrix Cloud side, they will get your cloud back, but your config is your responsibility, okay? So you need to make sure that you are backing this up once a quarter or however often you make changes, so that you have that information so that you can immediately restore it. It takes about 30 seconds, honestly, to get the information back up. Okay, so what are some things that it's advisable for you to know? Now, again, I work for a reseller. I don't want you to think I'm saying this because I work for a reseller. It's probably best if you leave it to somebody who's done it before. But if you are in an environment where they're going to push you guys to do the configs or move the information and everything, you are going to need to know, be very well versed in Citrix virtual apps and desktops. Desktops as a service. Again, with the name changes. You need to understand that very well. You're going to need to understand the yet another markup language, or YAML, as everybody likes to call it, because that's where the files are stored on the export. And you can actually open those up, modify them. So say you don't want your machine catalog names to match when you import them into the new one, you can modify the name and it'll import with a new name. And thirdly, you're going to need to know PowerShell. All right, so you'll need to be able to run the PowerShell commands and the different pieces so that you can do bits and pieces, what ifs, all the other information that you want to know, okay? There are some requirements that go with the automated configuration tool. Obviously, you have to have a DAS environment. Wouldn't be able to do much good if you couldn't. The DAS environment must be the current release or its immediate predecessor, okay? So you can't be 3 or 4 current releases behind on your environment if you want to use the config tool. Now, I say that as it is supported on those. So if you have a problem and you're 4 back, they're going to say upgrade to a newer one because we need to keep the tool going. If you are a long-term service release customer, if you are on the last long-term service release, it is also supported on the export from a long-term service release. Okay? You are going to need to have access to your delivery controller. That's kind of a duh. You know, I've got to have my database and everything. I've got to have virtual desktop agents running, on a gold image or whichever way that we're going to go. .NET framework, most people are going to have that up to date anyway. And I have to have the Citrix PowerShell SDK. Most people will run this tool from their delivery controller because most of these requirements are already met on your delivery controller, right? So on the import side, I have to have access to the internet. Citrix has a web page that tells you what sections, if you have outbound limitations on your internet connections, there is a list of sites and or IP addresses that you can put in for exceptions to allow that outbound access, okay? You will need to have a Citrix Cloud account because you're going to have to authenticate to get that in there. You will also need to have a subscription for, I didn't change it here, sorry, desktops as a service in the cloud so that you have something to import it to. Okay, you will have to have already created your resource location. It will not create the resource location for you. That connector must be in a member of the domain that you are trying to join or import the information into. Okay, so you can have multi-cloud, multi-forest. You just got to make sure that you have a cloud connector in each of those so that it can have that communication. And then we talked about accessibility. Okay, now there were some limitations to the automated configuration tool that I was going to go over, but as most of us have seen before, the change is inevitable, right? Everything is going to change over. The first of that is they used to not import the icons. So if you had custom icons on any of your applications, you had to do that. Now there's a folder. You can put your custom icons in the folder. When you do the import, it will pull in your custom icons, okay? The second being that, the machine creation services, any machine catalogs that were created by machine creation services, you were not able to import. That has changed, and I did put an asterisk on here because it depends on what kind of machine catalog it is as to which way it's going to do the import, all right? If it is a dedicated desktop machine catalog, it will import every one of every one of the desktops when you run the tool, and you give it the command to import that catalog. I say that, keep that in mind, because once I've imported them into the cloud, they are no longer accessible on premises. Because what the tool does is it reaches into everybody's familiar with the registry entry, list of DDCs. It opens up that list of DDCs and it puts in the cloud connector. So once you've done that import on a dedicated desktop machine catalog, those machine catalogs are now in the cloud. They're in the cloud for good, okay? You can go and make the change back manually on each and every one of those desktops if you want to. Now, on a pooled set of desktops, what it does is it makes a clone of the last gold image that you used, okay? And then it takes that clone and it opens it up and it changes the entry in there for the list of DDCs. So that now you have your golden image. It does not create any desktops, okay? So when you're ready to go ahead and move your machine catalogs up, you will need to go in and say, here's my golden image, and it will have it already. I want 20 of these, and it will go ahead and create those catalogs. The good news about that one is that you can, as I said, you can change the machine catalog name for cloud, so you can tell the difference between cloud and on-premises, and you can do the same in the delivery group. Because one of the nice things about the Citrix Cloud and doing it this way is that you can aggregate your on-premises applications and desktops with your cloud apps and desktops all going through the Citrix Cloud Gateway service. So you can migrate your customers or your users over to the cloud gateway at any point during this migration process, and people will still be able to launch their desktops and do their work and everything, even though everything in the environment is still running on premises, okay? That allows you to use that common gateway, and you can do a gradual migration, except for dedicated desktop machine catalogs. They're gonna get moved. When they get moved, you're stuck. The tool does have the ability to mark a or a delivery group as active or inactive. So one of the things that a lot of the people we do work with, we will mark the cloud delivery group as active in the evening, run our testing, do all our stuff, and then run the command again to mark the on-premises as active. And then in the morning when everybody comes in, their desktops come from the on-premises environment. Okay, so it does allow for those things. The other option that you have when you're doing a migration is you can do a side-by-side migration. If you guys are similar with some of the upgrades in the past for Citrix, they recommended you stand up a new environment, have the old environment, do the migration and move everybody over there. This does work very well. It is a manual migration. You're gonna have to do all the work, all the legwork to get all the information up onto the environment. Reasons why you would do a side-by-side, first of all, if you've got unsupported applications, all right? If you still haven't gotten rid of that 2008 R2 server application, you're gonna have to do this manually. You're not gonna be able to bring that application over. Now, good news is, if you know how to edit YAML files, you can keep that one out and then add it in manually later and still use the config tool, okay? If I have unsupported OSs, or if you didn't meet those requirements on the current release or long-term service release, you can do the side-by-side migration. Okay? It is a manual move of all your users. You are going to have to maintain two infrastructures. Okay? So that means you're going to be keeping up with the cloud side and the other side. Any changes, make sure they get replicated in both spots. And obviously making sure that everybody's going to the right location. And worst of all, manually moving all your policies, you're moving all your published applications and desktops. That's a lot of work. So I do recommend, if you can do it, use the automated configuration tool, even if you only use it for bits and pieces. Let it import at least some of the information for you so you don't have to manually do all those. Okay, so some of the things you want to look out for. The biggest challenge I've seen with most of my customers, and hands down, I don't want to pick on Citrix support, but what's happening is your users are used to coming to you and saying, there's a problem. All right, the desktop's down, I can't get to this application or whichever. you have a very limited amount of troubleshooting you can do in your environment to figure out what's going on. Citrix has got the control plane, Citrix has got the access, the control layer and the access layer. If there's anything wrong with any of those, it's a phone call to Citrix. If the Citrix control plane is down for some reason, you're stuck. There's nothing you can do. You're twiddling your thumbs. And while Citrix does a good job of keeping those up, and it doesn't have an issue very often, what I've seen is the perception of the users is higher and much more animated because they have to wait for Citrix to get this stuff done. Okay, so do keep that in mind, that if there is a problem, troubleshooting could be a bit challenging. Okay, Citrix does have the status.cloud.com website, so you can go see if it is the control plane, or where it is. And I don't know who it was. Maybe some of the Citrix guys can tell us who it was that registered cloud.com for Citrix, but they got a raise, I hope. That was quite a deal. I thought that was pretty awesome that they got that going. It does update this information. The problem with this page is it updates every hour. Okay, now they are pretty good about getting it out when it's down and showing you that it's down. So usually within about 5 or 10 minutes of there being a problem, it'll show the problem on the website. But you're waiting for it to come back up and you're constantly refreshing on this page. It could be an hour after it's come back up before they update the page to show that it's back up. Okay, so my recommendation is have another way of testing to see if it's up, not waiting for it to show us back up if you're going on the cloud section. The other challenge everybody runs into is latency. All right, now instead of everything being on premises and everybody talking back and forth, now my communication has to go up to the cloud. Now, Citrix runs the control plane and the access layer in Azure. It is very responsive. It's usually not an issue. If your internet connection outbound is taxed now, it's not going to make it any better. All right, it's going to cause you some more problems. So you do want to keep an eye on the latency. There are some things that you can do to make it better, and we'll go through some of those. And again, I apologize for the eye chart. The main important thing I want you to see is this last line right here that goes across. By default, unless you make changes, all of your users are going to connect to the gateway in Citrix Cloud, which is then going to talk down to your cloud connector, which is then going to talk to the VDA, which is then going to talk to the cloud connector, which is then going to talk back to your user. Now, if I'm on premises, my traffic has now gone on premises, Citrix Cloud, on premises, Citrix Cloud, on premises, and now I'm talking to the VDA. And when it wants to talk back to me, it goes back the other direction, all right? So I'm winding up with a lot of extra latency in here, okay? So my advice is don't do that, okay? What you want to do, for starters, is you want to use the Rendezvous Protocol, all right? The Rendezvous Protocol is enabled by hitting that policy, and you can see default is prohibited. So by default, it is turned off. And the reason why that is because your resources, your resource layer, has to be able to talk back to the Citrix Cloud, not just the cloud connectors. So that means that any of your VDA VLANs are going to have access to the Citrix Cloud. A lot of people like to limit what outbound connections can be made. You're going to have to open those up so that they can talk, because then what will happen once I've done that is now my communication, you can see I can go straight from my device to the cloud gateway to the VDA. I skip the cloud connector because the VDA is able to talk directly back to Citrix instead of having to go through the cloud connector to get there. This does a great job of reducing the latency that you'll run through. You will need to troubleshoot it because it does require DNS information. You need to make sure that the protocol is working and so forth. You think you've turned it on because, hey, I flipped the switch in the policy, it must be working. That's not necessarily true. So a couple of places you can go to look to make sure that you are. First of all, you can run ctxsession.exe/v. All right, that is runnable in PowerShell as a general user. They don't need admin rights to run that executable. So that you can then get an output that looks similar to this. If it has the 4, TCP or UDP, and you can see, we can go through them, SSL, CGP, which is Cloud Gateway Protocol, back to ICA. If you have 4, whether it be TCP or UDP, then I'm in Rendezvous Protocol. TCP being non-enhanced data transport, UDP being enhanced data transport, okay? So you can see that if it comes up and says, if I'm coming up TCP, CGP, ICA, Rendezvous Protocol is not working, and you're going to have extra latency, okay? You can also look in Director. You'll have to go through, bring up the session, bring up the details, scroll down to the network, and bring that one up, and you get this screen. And you'll see at the bottom, it shows what connection protocol it's using. That's the one you want to look for. You can see this one is not Rendezvous Protocol enabled. this is what it looks like if it is Rendezvous Protocol is working, okay? So definitely you want to make sure you have the Rendezvous Protocol working. Now, how many people here think there's even a shorter cut that we can take than this? Okay, there is. I like shortcuts. Sometimes they don't work out so great, but I do like my shortcuts, okay? And that is, they have the direct workload connection. And what that does is it allows my users who are on my network or on a wide area network that has direct access to my network to connect directly to their VDAs. No more going from my device up to the cloud gateway down to the VDA. I can go directly over to the VDA. All right, which is how we normally work. And for those of you who have been here a long time, with Citrix a long time, you might remember a command called use alt adder. It's kind of a similar situation, right? Instead of using the gateway address, hand them out the VDA address. Obviously, they have to be able to talk directly to the VDA, okay? It does allow that direct connection to go through there on the corporate LAN. To enable that, the first thing you'll have to do, and I did get my screenshot updated. See, I got Daz. All right, wherever the Citrix guys are, I got Daz on there. You will have to go into your environment on Workspace and enable DAS on your workspace, okay? The other thing you're gonna have to do is you're gonna have to specify your network locations. And what you're specifying here is what the internet IP address is for the different locations that are internal. So if you do what is my IP and it gives you an IP address, that's the IP address you wanna put in here because that's what the cloud control plane is gonna see. It will then know that that is a local network, not an internet connection, and it will send them directly over to the VDAs. Now, there are some gotchas on this as well. Of course, what fun would it be if there weren't some things we had to watch out for? If your guest connections go out the same connection, then you won't be able to get on the guest wireless and connect up to your environment. It will fail, not just lose the protocol, but it will fail because it's being handed the internal address, which it's not being allowed to do. Now, you can get around this using two different IP addresses, one for guest access, one for internal, or you can use a hairpin entry in a firewall. I was told that there is a hairpin entry in a firewall. I don't know what that is. Sorry, I'm not a firewall guy, but you can do that. That will tell it, send that traffic back this way. Don't send it out to the internet, okay? And the result is, you got good latency, everybody gets, I'm not gonna pull in Oprah. She's a lot more animated than I am, okay? Now, a little bit of piece that I did have to modify on the flight over here, Rendezvous version 2. This wasn't new. It was in tech preview. Remember me talking about change being inevitable? Rendezvous v2, what it allows you to do is it will actually let you have cloud-hosted or on-premises hosted desktops that are either Azure AD only joined, not hybrid, not AD joined, but Azure AD joined machines, and not domain joined machines. So you could actually host desktops that are not part of your network and not part of your domain. All right? And it does this because it will go around the cloud connector. So now instead of my desktop registering with the cloud connector and then going to the cloud, my desktop registers directly to the Citrix Cloud. It's only available for Azure AD joined and non-domain joined. Your current AD joined machines require Kerberos to talk, and we can't get around having a domain and a cloud connector when we do that. It also, if you're doing multi-factor authentication, which I hope you really are, I heard the security mentioned earlier, security is important. If you got people logging in your Citrix environment, please make sure you've got multi-factor on there. So we make sure that you really know who that person is. But the FAS, Federated Authentication Service, does not work with the Rendezvous v2, okay? Requirements, you have to have Citrix Cloud, of course. You have to have the latest VDA, which, did I update that? Not 2112, it's actually 2203. You will have to have the 2203 version of the VDA, and you'll have to have the TCP and UDP ports open for it to communicate with Citrix Cloud as before. Okay, and the good news is, it's now generally available as of last Friday. So I had to rush and make a change to show that it's no longer a tech preview. You just meet the requirements, follow the rules in Citrix docs, and you'll see the information there, all right? The best part about this is, hopefully someday, we can get latency eliminated. I don't know if it's, Gen 5 on the phones, or we got satellites, we got those going on. Whenever we can do to get that latency gone, we want to get it gone, okay? That would be the dream, to eliminate the latency altogether. All right, so, sorry, we're gonna have to recap what we talked about. First thing we talked about was what is the Citrix Cloud? Make sure that you understand that you don't have to have your resource layer and your data layers in the cloud, but it is supported there. In fact, Citrix Cloud control plane is the only way to communicate with a set of resources in a cloud environment. You can no longer use your on-premises delivery controllers. Technically, it's not supported to control resources in AWS, Azure, or GCP. All right, we talked about why you should go to the cloud. We have, hopefully you guys got some good answers out of that one. What things should you watch out for, and what gotchas can you have, and what kind of stuff you want to do in the cloud. All right. Now what do? I read the thing on when you're giving a presentation, always have an action item. So I'm going to give you guys an action item. If you're not in the cloud, you can register for a trial account at Citrix's citrix.cloud.com. Again, cloud.com. So go to citrix.cloud.com. You can log in with your current My Citrix credentials. It will do set up a multi-factor for you to go in there, and you can request a trial. That trial is good for 30 days. No, you don't have to keep adding new email addresses. Generally, if you reach out to your Citrix guys and say, hey, can I have another 30 days to try this out? Usually they'll be willing to do that for you. Okay? Again, I want to thank the user group leaders for inviting me up here and letting me come out and speak for you guys. I had a good information. Are there any questions that I could answer for anybody? This is always the quiet part. So hands, anyone? No? Okay. That's all I got. Appreciate it, guys.